Mohsin Hamid's The Reluctant Fundamentalist, 2007, is a critically acclaimed novel that explores themes of identity, globalization, post-colonialism, and the cultural tensions between the East and the West, particularly in the aftermath of the September 11th attacks. Structured as a dramatic monologue, the novel presents a tense, one-sided conversation between the Pakistani protagonist, Changes, and an unnamed American stranger in a cafe in Lahore. Over the course of a single evening, Changes narrates his journey from an ambitious Princeton graduate and Wall Street analyst to a disillusioned outsider who rejects American capitalism and returns to Pakistan. Told entirely through Changes' perspective, the novel leaves room for ambiguity and suspicion. The reader becomes complicit in deciphering truth from narrative performance, raising questions about storytelling, bias, and political subjectivity. The Reluctant Fundamentalist is as much about personal transformation as it is a critique of the global systems that marginalize and alienate individuals across cultures. Frame narrative: Lahore Cafe. The novel is structured as a long, continuous monologue delivered by Changes to an unnamed American visitor in a Lahore cafe. This narrative device creates a constant undercurrent of tension. The American never speaks, but Changes reacts to his body language and presumed responses, inviting the reader to imagine what is unsaid. From the outset, the setting in Lahore is fraught with unease. Changes comments on the American's wariness and glances at a bulge under his jacket, possibly a weapon, hinting at the political and personal dangers underlying the conversation. This frame remains in place throughout the novel and becomes increasingly suspenseful as night falls. Part 1. The American Dream. Changes begins his story with his early life in Pakistan. He is from a once prominent, now financially diminished family in Lahore. Determined to succeed, he earns a scholarship to Princeton University, where he excels academically and socially. His experiences at Princeton mark the beginning of his transformation into a westernized elite. Upon graduation, Changes is recruited by Underwood Sampson, a prestigious valuation firm in New York. The firm values efficiency, meritocracy, and global capitalism, ideals that Changes initially embraces wholeheartedly. His mentor, Jim, sees a younger version of himself in Changes and fast-tracks his career. During this time, Changes meets Erica, a wealthy and emotionally fragile young woman who becomes the object of his affection. Erica is still mourning her deceased boyfriend, Chris, and struggles with mental health issues. Though Changes becomes close to her, he is never fully able to occupy the space left by Chris. Erica's inability to reciprocate his love mirrors his later alienation from American society. Part 2. Cracks appear. Changes' initial infatuation with the American way of life begins to fray following the September 11th attacks. He describes his reaction with disturbing honesty. He felt a moment of pleasure at the symbolism of the towers falling, not out of hatred, but as an instinctive reaction to America's power being challenged. This admission foreshadows his growing disconnection from the country he once admired. As America descends into paranoia, Changes begins to feel out of place. He is subject to suspicion and profiling, both at airports and in daily life. Meanwhile, his relationship with Erica deteriorates. She retreats into grief and eventually enters a mental institution. Changes' attempt to become a replacement for Chris, going so far as to encourage Erica to imagine him during intimacy, fails tragically. Professionally, Changes begins to question the morality of his work. On a business trip to the Philippines, he realizes the predatory nature of Underwood Sampson's valuations, which often lead to layoffs and exploitation in developing countries. His growing discomfort culminates when he fails to complete an important valuation assignment in Chile, instead choosing to reflect on the legacy of colonialism and American imperialism. Part 3. Return to Lahore. Disillusioned, Changes resigns from Underwood Sampson and returns to Pakistan. There, he becomes a university lecturer and vocal critic of American foreign policy, particularly its military interventions in the Muslim world. He grows a beard, a symbol of cultural pride, but also a source of suspicion. He becomes increasingly involved in anti-American discourse and protests. While he denies any association with violent groups, his public stance becomes more oppositional. He begins to be seen as a controversial figure, both celebrated and feared. The narrative in the cafe grows tenser. Changes speculates about the American's purpose. Is he a tourist, a journalist, or something more sinister? Is he here to understand Changes or eliminate him? The novel ends ambiguously, with Changes offering to walk the American back to his hotel. The final lines describe a glint of metal and Changes' outstretched hand, leaving the reader uncertain whether a handshake or an act of violence will follow. Analysis. 1. Narrative structure and unreliable narrator. The novel's most distinctive feature is its dramatic monologue format. By giving the narrative solely to Changes, Hamid foregrounds subjectivity. The reader hears only one side of the conversation and must interpret the silent American's reactions through Changes' interpretation. This structure creates narrative ambiguity. Is Changes a reliable narrator? Is he a peaceful professor or a radical? Is the American a mere tourist or an intelligence agent? The tension between storytelling and truth becomes central. The novel implicitly critiques the binary thinking of post-9/11 discourse, where people are classified as friend or enemy, patriot or terrorist. This format also forces the reader into the American seat, silent, judged, and observed, subverting the Western gaze. By flipping the narrative, Hamid compels Western readers to confront their own assumptions and biases. 2. Identity and cultural dislocation. Changes' journey is fundamentally about identity, its construction, loss, and reclamation. Initially, he embraces American ideals, adapting smoothly into elite academic and professional circles. However, the events of 9/11 and the resulting rise in xenophobia force him to confront his otherness. His growing beard symbolizes a return to cultural and religious roots, but also a refusal to conform. Changes realizes that his American identity is conditional, accepted as long as he complies, but rejected the moment he resists. Erica serves as a metaphor for America, beautiful, idealized, but ultimately unattainable and self-absorbed. Changes' failure to connect with her mirrors his inability to fully assimilate. Her mental unraveling and eventual disappearance foreshadowed Changes' emotional break with the US. 3. Globalization and economic imperialism. Through Changes' work at Underwood Sampson, Hamid critiques global capitalism. The firm's motto, "Focus on the fundamentals," becomes ironic. In pursuing value, the firm destroys local economies, strips human elements from decision-making, and perpetuates inequality. Changes' awakening in Chile, where he reflects on U.S. involvement in Allende's overthrow, marks a turning point. He sees parallels between his role as a corporate tool and America's imperial strategies. His resignation is a rejection not just of a job, but of a system that commodifies nations and identities. The title's double meaning becomes clear. Changes is both a fundamentalist in the sense of seeking core truths, economic, political, personal, and reluctant, in that he did not begin with radical views, but was pushed toward them by experience. 4. Post-9/11 tensions and the politics of fear. The reluctant fundamentalist captures the post-9/11 cultural and political climate with nuance. Hamid critiques both Western paranoia and Eastern resentment, showing how cycles of fear and aggression dehumanize individuals. Changes is stereotyped based on appearance. His emotions are policed, his loyalty is questioned. At the same time, he becomes more critical and resentful of American hypocrisy, championing freedom while suppressing dissent. Hamid portrays a world where dialogue breaks down, replaced by surveillance, suspicion, and preemptive violence. The cafe scene encapsulates this perfectly: two men, each potentially dangerous, trapped in a performance of civility while mistrusting the other's intentions. 5. Symbols and motifs. Beard represents changes as cultural reassertion and resistance to Western conformity. It also marks him as suspect in a post-9/11 world. Erica and Chris. Erica's inability to move on from Chris symbolizes America's fixation on its past: purity, security, dominance. Her illness reflects national trauma and nostalgia. The Underwood-Sampson firm, a microcosm of American economic power, efficient, emotionless, and expansionist. Lahore Café. The setting becomes a stage for geopolitical confrontation. Its intimacy contrasts with the looming danger implied throughout. 6. Ambiguity and open-endedness. The novel's final scene remains deliberately ambiguous. Is changes extending a hand in friendship or leading the American into a trap? Is the American reaching for a gun or his wallet? Hamid resists closure because certainty breeds complacency. The novel insists on complexity. There are no easy answers or moral absolutes. The ambiguity invites reflection rather than judgment. The real fundamentalism may lie in binary thinking itself. Conclusion. Mohsin Hamid's The Reluctant Fundamentalist is a compelling and provocative novel that forces readers to examine the world through an alternative lens. It challenges dominant narratives of patriotism, terrorism, globalization, and identity, offering instead a meditation on how individuals are shaped and alienated by the systems in which they live. Through its innovative form, rich symbolism, and emotionally charged prose, the novel dismantles the myths of assimilation and the innocence of power. Changes as transformation, from idealistic immigrant to reluctant critic, is not a call to extremism, but a call to consciousness. In a world increasingly divided by suspicion and fear, the reluctant fundamentalist urges empathy, self-examination, and the courage to question received truths. It is both a deeply personal story and a searing political statement, one that continues to resonate with global audiences seeking to understand the fractured world they inhabit.